There we go.
Nice. Yes, there's no massive structure to this. I don't know, maybe a raise of hands. Has anyone seen what I shared across a few channels yesterday? And I will post it into the chat so everyone has it. The general idea is it's looking at this kind of challenge setting approach that we have at the moment. And what are some other ways we can do that? How can we kind of decide on kind of areas, whether that's kind of like events or dApps or these kind of different ways of breaking it down, and what kind of different approaches we can think about for what's the best way to manage that and kind of just, things like distributing it. Now, when I kind of started looking into this, and it was partly from obviously experience of writing some challenge settings myself, and also just obviously in Fund 6 and Fund 7, some of the outcomes we've had. For instance, sometimes we get like duplicates where you see like two similar identity kind of ones. Sometimes we have things where there's like very little funding for developer ecosystem. Then you have issues like for instance, if I was working on a DeFi app, I have an incentive to create a DeFi kind of challenge and try to make it, that seem more important and make that have a certain kind of weighting. And there's incentives for me to kind of do those kind of things. So the first thing I kind of did is to try and list out some of these kind of issues that we have in this current process. And then on from that, I was starting to look at, okay, let's step back from this. What are the different ways we can kind of think about this? So the first kind of main thing I've been looking at is how this kind of like broadness to how specific a challenge is. So the most broad you could be is we don't have challenge settings, and we just have, everyone puts a proposal into one thing. That's the most broad you can be. there's no allocation there. It's just nice and simple, but it obviously comes with different complexities. Then it's very difficult to stand out. And on the other end, you could have really, really specific things. So you could pick like, some Botswana and say, we're doing DeFi protocols for Botswana. Very, very specific. And the key things that I was kind of picking up on, more thinking about it and seeing that how we have, is the more specific you get, the more complexity you have in needing to be like justify why you're going to put funding there over somewhere else. And it becomes very easy for those very specific things to replace kind of other things. So if you're going to focus on, let's say, one country or one area really specific, it often means that if you have a set of, let's say, 15 of those, it means other areas can easily be missed out. So you get this increased complexity of like, okay, what's the budget weighting that should be on these things? What's the, why should it be like, these community related things in this specific location? Like all of this adds a lot of complexity and potential restriction when you add on that at the budget kind of allocation thing. And the key thing I was kind of looking at is like, a key kind of objective is that we want to maximize the opportunities for anyone across the world at any time to kind of be able to submit ideas. And how we kind of restrict it needs to be with some confidence. Like we want to know, like if you're going to go for very specific, we want to be very confident that that's like exactly what we need to do. Like if we don't have that confidence, then it's very speculative. It's just kind of like, we think it should go here and we're hoping the innovation comes, but we have no like justification that it definitely will. So this is what kind of led to what is suggested in that documentation is some kind of high level categories. So things that will include, and like, I'm not saying they definitely do at the moment, I think they do. And this is why I'm hoping to get some more feedback from people to see like, does this include everything? These high level categories, let's say it's 4 or 5 categories, this covers everything. And then the only main thing when you have that kind of setup sorted is it's just budget weighting. The complexity just lies in the budget weighting. How much should you allocate to each one of those little buckets? And you can see that if you have 5 of them, it's much less complex than you have 10. Because if there's like 10, then you've got to do the budget weighting for 10 of them, and it gets much more hard to justify. Oh, what's the even if it was just that's the only kind of metric you change, where you say, okay, instead of 5 we have 10. But the complexity we have in the existing system is we have 10 plus they're self-elected, so you have all the incentive problem and all that kind of thing. So if anyone has any questions of that, I'll let them raise hands. Oh, there we go. There's one already behind. So we'll start raising hands if you have any questions, or just kind of like, if you don't understand it, let's make sure everyone understands it first. Please raise your hands. Hopefully I did an okay job there, but I will let it start with Heinz. Please go nuts.
So George, I have to admit I haven't been really thoroughly reading your document yet.
It's
but
they're always long, and yeah, that's absolutely fine. No one has to read all of it.
I wanted to share. You know, we did the Catalyst Innovation Survey, which was very nicely actually participated. And I haven't found yet any possibility to share the intermediate results, but one of the intermediate results from quite some qualitative statements was actually to consider having challenge settings, but having challenge settings for different types of activities, as you, I think, also said. So that's not only one format of challenge setting, one size covers all. There is different, like we do product development, we do service development, we do kind of quite different types of activities. And one other thing that, of course, for the product development, typically challenge settings would give us an excellent opportunity to influence from a kind of a portfolio management view, that we kind of steer the whole thing in a good way. So I'll try to find a good opportunity to share the results very soon, but it's going in a similar direction, I think, as you are outlining here.
Sounds great. I think this is one of the interesting things that came up from some of the feedback I had in some of the telegrams today, is that I think there is a few ways you could still have high level categories, but there's a few ways you could implement it. So as an
maybe
example,
some final. Otherwise, I keep more quiet. I don't want to take it too long.
Please.
I also posted I will see if it flies. I put the challenge setting proposal for Fund 8, which was intended more for service style proposals. So where it's more prescription instead of jumping from one project to the next. Like what we are building up and also others are building up is actually specific services to the community, where currently we are forced to filletize it in small projects and fit it in some challenge setting. And that's neither fair to the community advisors, nor is it's creating a lot of administration. So this is why I really hope that we get some different types of challenge settings with different funding strategies also.
Love it.
All right.
I saw that challenge setting, and it had some similarities with the Catalyst contributor stuff that I've been working on, with this kind of like just paying people so they're a bit more fluid, that they can kind of help in these kind of like areas and different areas.
It could easily be combined, or it could easily be somehow combined together. It's
yeah. So that is so the Catalyst contributors is one of these kind of high level categories that I've just added into this kind of documentation. Some of the other ones, just to list them out, was community and outreach. We've got Catalyst ecosystem, Cardano ecosystem, Catalyst contributors, stake pool contributors, and dApps and integrations, which is obviously one of the big ones. So that was kind of like, at the moment, what I'm thinking, and I've been back testing it and putting all of the different challenges that we've had that's selected into those kind of brackets, and so far they all fit, and it seems to all work. And like the idea is to keep it as simple as possible in terms of like breaking it down enough so it makes sense, but not too much so then you get increased budget weighting complexity. So that's
maybe a quick final thought. When I was at AB InBev hiring a lot of consultants, we wanted to get away from having service providers in annual contracts, because that's too static, that's people are leaning back. So I was trying to introduce rolling quarterly agreements. So where you had a kind of a bindingness for the first, a less bindingness for the second quarter, and for the third, almost nothing. So you, as a service provider, you still can responsibly run teams, you can hire people, but so you're not threatened from one fund to the next, everything or nothing. But it's still highly controllable for the community. No one can, so to say, get an annual prescription and lean back. So these ideas, I really hope that we find some less, let's say, administratively overloaded form for the service and tool providers or whatever is. We have quite some activities in that segment.
Love it. Right. I remember having this exact same thought with the Catalyst contributor stuff, because I was just like, it shouldn't really be something where they're like paid as an employee and it's just kind of rolling. So this is why I started off at this kind of 6-month term, because one, you could hire more people in the short term to test it out quicker. And two, it's just like, well, if we haven't got any process in place at the moment to let's say you're not performing to fire you, that already adds some complexity. And how are we making that decision? Like, you can do it on the fly. It's like, oh, this person's obviously not performing based on what criteria. So it's like, by keeping this kind of 6-month term on similar kind of ideas to you kind of limit that kind of risk. And then as you actually have a process for like firing people, then you can think about, okay, let's change this from 6 to 12, or like maybe that makes more sense. Or they're like a repeat. They've been hired once and they were good, so now they can do a 12-month one. There's a few ways you can think about the model, and it minimizes risk but maximizes kind of like that increasing that security of time, increasing that easiness, so then you can really focus on the things you want to focus on rather than admin crap. So love it. I'll hand it over. Sophie.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for sort of kicking off the ball in this direction. I think this discussion was sort of waiting to happen from different directions. So that's nice. And yeah, I think in general, just the idea of adding sort of more layers, even if at first it doesn't even have a real functional implication, but just if we have a discussion even on this level about what should the budgets be in between these different areas is already interesting. I think one thing to mention or to point out is that I thought about this as well, and I think there's also different sort of dimensions that you can differentiate between them. So this one is very focused on the domain that you proposed. So there's different domain challenge settings. But another dimension could be the level of autonomy that the challenge is taking in sort of changing the system. Because we know we want to move towards, or there's this idea of moving towards more autonomous challenges, but it's now a bit difficult to propose a challenge that sort of radically changes the system, or the challenge team is really saying like, hey, we have this system in place to kind of change how things are. And like, yeah, I think that's something to consider, how we can give space to that experimentation as well. And the other dimension that I thought about is scale, because one issue is also that within challenges, there's such a difference between the scale of projects that comparing them becomes almost like meaningless. Like, how can you compare a 3,000 to a 100,000 proposal, right? It's so difficult. And I think also like about whether all the challenges matches, I think you could do it like this, but I see as well something like the Catalyst Contributors Challenge as well as one of those experimental challenges that is trying to do something new. And although I really like the concept, but there's always also the details. So if we choose one, then we're sort of having to struggle together to get those details to what everybody wants. But if there's some category for those kind of experimental challenge settings, or a challenge setting for those kind of experimental challenges, then we can try out more of those. And maybe you could say that the rapid funding mechanism also kind of fits in that categories, and some others that didn't actually make it in because they were a bit too experimental for everybody to take on. I know some examples of those.
Yeah, definitely on the
some thoughts.
I definitely agree with it. This is the thing. I think we've all kind of been talking about this rapid funding for quite a while. Felix and quite a few others have been looking and doing stuff on that and proposing, and it is something that is going to hopefully definitely help with these ones where they're 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, because like this high level categories thing really doesn't solve the rapid funding side. It is really like focusing on these kind of bigger amounts of money and just simplifying that challenge setting process, whereas having some different processes for the rapid funding will help for these kind of smaller ones. So yeah, that's definitely, I added in rapid funding into the docs to kind of talk about things that are relevant for each of those kind of challenge areas, but then it just wouldn't be dealt with by like the ideas go process. The nice thing with this high level category suggestion is it fits in with the existing system we have. And that's always the way approach I'm trying to do with all this. It's like, I'm not trying to, go to the end result of like how it should be exactly. I'm just like, this works in this system. It will work for a good little while. And then we have the capacity to kind of start to pick things away and move away from it. Because it's like, you can't get to the end from the start. So that's kind of the thought. But thank you. Thanks for all that, those thoughts. So Felix.
Yeah, thinking a lot about the categories and mostly about where would it make the most sense. Because right now, let's say, for example, these thoughts here, they come from a little bit, let's say, Catalyst veterans and OGs, right? We have already a lot of experience. So a new person coming into Catalyst would not come up with an idea like this and would maybe highly appreciate a bunch of different challenges where they see, whoa, hey, cool, I really fit in this or in that. So to say that we have now the possibility to define categories comes only by the fact that we had the community over the last 9 months submitting challenge proposals, 12 months, which then allows us to have already all this data and then starting to identify, okay, what fits into a cluster, into a group or whatnot, which means already this process is extremely valuable, right? To have the community who identifies problems they want to work on, vote on them, allocates a fund, and then work on the solutions. I think this is an extremely valid process anyway. Where it lacks now is when you have a project in Catalyst, for example, and there are some now around, and you run through 3 funding rounds. Now you need another environment, right? Because you have a project, you have your team, you have to enable resources to pay your team. And it's extremely difficult now to build a sustainable already model when you don't know which challenges you have available to submit your proposals in 3 months from now. On the other side, it forces you to build an extreme flexible and dynamic project. Because if you don't know, then you have to survive somehow, right? So what we see with projects like, for example, the projects which emerged from the community themselves by the struggle, they develop kind of very interesting and natural evolving structures to handle this problem. After a certain time now, let's say after 9 months, successful voted through, let's say, for example, 3 funding rounds. Now, for this project, they have a huge lack now. What's the next step? What comes after Catalyst? You have your project, you build up a strong team, a strong idea, a strong everything. But now you have to rely each time on not yet known challenges. Here would make the categories now really sense, but at an add-on after what we have in Catalyst, not change the whole format, but think, okay, what are immediate next steps? What should we have after? Let's say, for example, 1 to B. And here the categories would make a lot of sense, for example, to say categories, which are always there, but just accessible for projects who already won 1, 2, or 3 funding rounds, and now need really a safe, let's say, environment where they can say, okay, cool. You can apply now in an environment which is not changing each 3 months.
I love this thought on that when you have this, and this is like a secret benefit to the specific challenges, is that if you have something that's, let's say, gamers on change, which is like this, just like 1 step lower than having dApps and integration, it's just like, it's just kind of the next step. It's not that much more specific, but it's just a little bit more specific because it's a type of dApp and integrations, is that it becomes much more inviting. It can become much more inviting to that kind of person there. So it could have this kind of like more effect on pulling people in to make those kind of proposals. And I think it's something that is important to think about, because this is a problem, and something I mentioned in the documentation is the high level categories means you obviously always can propose something. You can always be able to fit it in should be able to fit it in a bucket. However, there's more competition. And the problem I see with that, especially if the rapid funding thing is in place, then why we need to have it in place is because if a smaller player will struggle to get light in this situation from the bigger players, from the DC Sparks, the big ones that we know is that, oh yeah, everyone knows, great, vote, that kind of situation. And that's what I'm scared about with the high level stuff. And it definitely am. And the ways I've been thinking about it is we need to have ways to, let's say it lets you have this curated, like a gamers on chain list, or these kind of like, it's environment based, or like make sure that these kind of things come to light. So whether it's tagging or whatever, we need to have a way so people can really kind of see the things that matter to them. And you can have that kind of separated from the kind of budget, the complexities with budget allocation and the budget weightings and all that kind of thing. So you're trying to solve that problem at the layer up rather than here, where it adds a lot of complexity with the budget thing, because then you can have a potential of misallocating budgeting for a whole 3 months. So yeah, massive area of concern and things to think about. So thank you very much. I think it's Dwayne. I think I've seen you in.
Yeah. Yep, that's me.
That's it. There you go.
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah. Crystal clear.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah, I really love the category idea. Some suggestions I'd have is categories by objective. So for instance, we had talked about increasing memberships, increasing the number of dApps, right? And if you go that way, then you can go for a KPI or ROIs by the category, which would then be inherited by each of the challenges under it. So if you defined it once, all right, every challenge under that would have it. And I'd also, I'd put in a miscellaneous category, or sorry, category, just for anything else. So I guess somebody comes up with something completely off the wall and they want a challenge for something that doesn't meet any of your normal objectives. And then once you've got this in place, I think the next step beyond that would be to have a vote on the budget percentages, right? So for instance, if I'm interested in increasing the number of members, right? And I think, 25% of our budget should go towards that. I might just want to vote on that. And I don't really care how the specific challenges underneath it, like, is it grow Africa? Is it grow Latin America, whatever? I should be able to just vote on that and say, okay, just put that aside. We should be spending 25% on growth, right? And blah, blah, blah. And if you start working on that route as the second stage to this, and I think you're setting yourself up for that, then you make it a lot easier for people when they are doing their voting to be able to not have to go through I think there are like 50 or so different challenges, in the challenge setting. And I just think that would make it a lot easier for people, for voters. And finally, if you're doing it by the categories, then you can compare similar challenges, right? So like you were saying earlier, we've got a whole bunch of things like, grow Africa, grow Latin America, grow whatever, right? So yes, we need to have money towards things that are membership growing, but we also need to, you want to limit that in some way, and because they're taking away from like dApps and all that. And if you've got them so that they're all grouped into a challenge, then it makes it easier to say, this is how much money we should be putting towards that as a voter, as opposed to, just picking them up at random. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, you've literally hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the kind of, and in the docs, it kind of talks about this kind of budget weighting thing as the key only complexity when if you just have high level categories, it really is that kind of budget weighting thing. And that's just something that if with this more feedback and we say, yeah, this fits everything in there, and this solves the problem, and it's better for these reasons in terms of reducing that complexity of decision paralysis from having to what the voters go through. We just need to focus on budget weighting on this. Then this is something that we can push forward to try and get into the voting app. So it's, let's say it is those categories, and then it has the numbers from the previous round, and then you can just minus plus and be like, yeah, I think this needs a bit more, this needs a bit less. And that's how people vote. So they can be like, the Catalyst ecosystem is going really well. Like all the tools are working quite well. We can reduce the budget there a little bit and then add it onto the community and outreach one, because there's some really good communities forming in these 4 or 5 different countries. It'd be nice to see more budget go there. And that complexity scales quite well. And then obviously you can add on complexity as you have more tools and the thing. So bang on understanding, and yeah, like love the kind of what you shared there. Rodolfo, I think you had your hand up, but you put it down.
Yeah,
I've lost you.
I'm gonna say kind of the same. Is like how we manage when we need to promote minorities or misrepresented groups. So how to handle that on your model. So maybe that what you say is the way. It's not clear in the document, but I think it's really nice to say a word on it.
Yeah, it's with high level categories, it's my biggest concern. And I can see it happening without really thinking about it now. I see it happening immediately without trying to start thinking of action. So although I think it is a bet at the moment, from what everything I've analyzed, I think it's a better solution. It puts small players at a potential weakness if they don't have any kind of way to outreach people and they don't make anything from that. So it's on us to make sure that we have ways to kind of identify that. And I think what I would like to see is if Catalyst contributors get funded to kind of help with that. For instance, we don't need to cover what DC Spark do. Like it's like people who are in Catalyst don't need to cover that. Like they're so well known they've got their own voice, and they've got, 20, 30, 40,000 threads, and similar to a lot of other DEX DeFi protocols and stuff. The ones you do want to help is like those newcomers. You want to go have like those kind of Zoom meetings and record them, and like just chat through the project. And then you kind of have people maybe who are trusted in the community, whether it's like the Catalyst contributors or Catalyst Circle, to be like, yeah, we've talked to all these people and they're great. You should really please look at this and then add them to these kind of like curated lists. These are all the really cool environment ones. These are the really cool gaming ones. And I think this is how we make sure that no one gets left out, because I'm very worried about that, because that, that could stifle small up and coming things. And that's definitely not what we want. So we don't just want to be, giving stuff to the big players. We can solve the budgeting, the allocation problem, but then we have to make sure we think about the next level. So. Floor is open. Anyone can take it.
George, I missed your intro, honestly. It would be great if you could just give back like just a very high level overview, maybe for also all other new people that just joined.
Yeah, certainly. So hopefully you can see back through the chat. I will post it again. I've recently done some docs on this to do with high level categories. And the idea is just to think about how we're doing challenge settings and how we're doing funding. So instead of doing very specific challenge settings where everyone's going to trying to come up with different ideas and then say, oh, here's the budget waiting for this. Instead, it's trying to make it much more simple and thinking, how can we have a small number of high level categories that cover any kind of idea and innovation? And then with that, the only complexity is we just need to decide what's the budget weighting between them per fund. So then anyone each round can propose, and we're just doing very kind of small maneuvers on where things need to going. So some of the categories that we have that I've got in there is dApps and integrations, outreach and community, Catalyst ecosystem, Cardano ecosystem. There's obviously the Catalyst natives, which is completely separate. That it's just it's like it's the add-on to anything else. And then we've got Catalyst contributors and the stake pool contributors, so people like working full time. And that from the back testing it so far, and I still think more needs to be done. I want to look at some of the challenges that haven't been funded as well. But like I've being on my own, I've only had so much time to go through everything before fund date, so I'm trying to like share it and work on this at the same time. But that is probably a high level summary. Is how do we make that as simple as possible, but it just works, and there's less decision paralysis and budget weighting complexities from having so many challenges and duplicates and all these different problems we have. So is that okay? Sweet. Yeah. Dwayne, take it again, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question here. If we want to put in recommendations or discuss this, what's the best form that you're using for, outside of, this in-person one, but like just by typing through the week?
I did make a Google Doc just before this Zoom, but I haven't shared it yet. That's just with the link of the docs and then some simple subtitles, new ideas, opportunities, concerns for people. So if you want to asynchronously just add stuff into this Google Doc, please just throw it in there. So the reason I use Gitbook is because it's very accountable to any change I make. So I mean, there's already controversy coming up with the Catalyst contributors that the last today. So there's a history of all my changes and when they get made. So that's all on Git. And this is the reason I like to use Gitbook, because one, people can fork it and take copies of it. So it means you get 5-10 people having forked copies of it on their own GitHub profile. Whereas Notion, I could just flip the switch, you don't have access anymore. So that's the reason I use Gitbook. But the problem is that it's hard for people to be like, oh, I can do like on Google where you can like leave comments and stuff. So it's a trade-off that I make, that I'd rather people see and have accountability to fork what I do and see that kind of when I've done it, because at some point it might bite me in the ass if I can't prove it. So, but when I am trying to get the feedback, I think Google Docs is really good for that. So that's why I will throw a link in now. So if you have anything on that, throw it in there. Or obviously right now is just throw any concerns out, and we have time to go through and think about it over the next week before fund date stuff, challenge stuff.
Okay, excellent. And is there a particular forum or thread that you're using for discussions as well, or is just this document would be the best?
I'd just say this document, because I literally made the Gitbook and then was like, yeah, ready. Like, I was trying to get it out as soon as possible. I've not really thought any further than that Gitbook. So this Google Doc is, and obviously I've been showing it in the Telegrams and stuff. So anyone who's messaged me about it, it's just any feedback that comes in, I will But I'll try and I'll put it all on this doc, okay? Just to
Perfect.
make
Thanks.
sure it's Nadeem.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's great. From what I gather is that you've analyzed the process and you're proposing sort of enhancements on the process. Just wondering, how would you go about implementing that? Like, what is the next steps on that, and who decides what gets implemented and what doesn't?
Yeah, so this is a bit tricky. What's going to be needed is, and this is that everything I do is trying to use the existing process, because the existing process won't change overnight. So the idea is all of these categories will go as challenge setting proposals for the next one. And realistically, what it's going to have to be is, like, if you want all of these to go in, you need to upvote all of these and kind of downvote the others and be like, this is the new system I'm going to want. And then if you don't want this, then downvote all of this and then choose which ones you want from the other kind of approach. So I haven't thought of a better way to do it, that it is still democratic. It's still going to be people choosing it, and it's using the existing system we have. Like, we don't have another system to do this at the moment. So I think that's probably the only way I can think about doing it, is being like, if you like all this, just upvote these ones, and this is kind of like the structure, or downvote them, and then people are still going to make probably challenge settings. There is potential issues here, to be fair. Like, you know, if people start thinking this is fine, and then people make no efforts in the other stuff, then I see risks there. So like, I think that maybe Danny's in here, Marek's in here. Maybe we need to do like a community vote on it when we get closer to it. I don't know. Like, there is risks here. Like, all I can do is think of ideas that I think are going to be better, and then do what I can to try and push it forward and make it happen. But if something happens wrong, on the execution, it's just going to, like, I'm just doing the best I can kind of situation. Because at the end of the day, as soon as it gets to the vote, it's somewhat out of my hand. Like, 3 of them could go through for the new approach, and then some random challenges come in. It's like, this wasn't what was supposed to happen, and I don't know how to solve that in the short term. But I mean, yeah, the short answer would be that it would just go through that process, though, because it really is trying to use that. So I would, to expand what categories I've got, I need to expand them into the equivalent campaign briefs. So and then probably kind of really kind of go over what is that objective of each of those ones, so it's very crystal clear, and then all the examples even more so, of like, you're welcomed in this one for all of these different things. There's so many different things you can add into outreach and community. It's a nice encompassing community events, all these different things. It's making sure that people understand it's very inclusive. So that's the next steps for me to try and help with that. And if anyone wants to help with that, like, doors open. Oh, Sophie.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's a difficult question, right? How do we, like, it's one thing to come up with ideas, and then it's a whole other thing is like, how do we go to implementation and actually deciding, and that's a difficult topic. I do see some issues with like with what you're suggesting, and you're pointing them out as well. So I know you're aware of them, but yeah, if I think about it myself, so would I right now, like, give up trying to promote the challenge that I'm now sort of like trying to give continuity, or jump on this ship, right? And it's like, yeah, that's too much risk, because maybe some people do that and then other challenges don't, and it doesn't happen, and then you just end up with, like, yeah, maybe a whole even lower or very converged group of challenges, right? Maybe certain types of people will think this is the right effort, which or people that are doing certain challenges now. So there's a bit of a risk there, and I think just as a but it's then more of an opinion. But I like the idea of sort of maybe even less than this amount, but seeing if we can. It runs into the same issue, but see if we can do this for the challenge setting, right? Not the actual challenges. But there's now only one challenge setting, right? And that's just one. If you want to make a challenge, there's one challenge setting with one entire budget to make them, and you can make all kinds of challenges. But if these higher level categories were on the challenge setting level, right, then people can still make challenges, but we can start to sort of you can already do some budgeting differences, right? You could split it up in 3 or something like that, even more simple. And maybe it's, but still that would need like yeah, approval or some
yeah, maybe, I mean, there's like this would have to be a chat with Marek, who's there, and Danny. Maybe, like, for instance, maybe one approach of using idea scale, how it is that we have this kind of challenge setting category. Maybe we have one that's high level categories, it's like funding categories and challenge setting, and then the one that, and then so you have them running in parallel. I just add in the ones here for this one, and then this one runs in parallel, and whichever one gets the most engagement in terms of voting, and that's how you kind of give your kind of indication of which one you want to see happen. Maybe that maybe, because then they're not mixed together. So then we're just using idea scale for separating them out. So if you want to just like ignore this one and just upvote these ones because this is how you would prefer it to happen, then you go boom, 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 done. Or you do the normal challenge setting approach in here and then pick the ones you want, and then people are still encouraged to do the existing kind of thing. And then you kind of have that kind of, we're using the existing system to find a way to vote on, you know, like which route you want to go down. Because if you have, you know, 200 million go here and only 50 million go here, you know that most people were interested in this side. And, you know, rather than this situation where we have 3 of the ones that is recommended in here and then some random other ones go in there, maybe this is how we kind of turn this into a decision where we use exactly what we have, and it adds little complexity. Oh, well, I don't want to say that without really knowing. I think it should add little complexity for Marek. But no, it's just having that idea now. That's a potential solution. I think there might be other ways to think about this, but like, I really don't want to bugger up the challenge setting if, let's say, it's 50-50. That's a big issue. So like, if most people love it, those people are just like, communication needs to be there a lot, and also need to be thinking about how do we actually make sure we don't bugger up the process in any way. So sweet. I'm not going to pronounce your name very well, Oscar.
Yes, thanks, George, for the work and contribution that you have done. You know, many times we have been discussing in different groups about how challenging to understand the project catalyst funding process, and then I think that's a good initiative to make it understandable and easier. And it's particularly important for tracing the budget allocated for different, let's say, categories, so that whole investors and everyone can understand and maybe can see themselves as a you know, contributor to specific and target to specific categories. I would like to also remind Tommy's message. Maybe you have not seen that because you have been talking. I think he made it a bit clearer by getting inspired by you. I would like to reshare his link. You know, he also divided it with 2 groups by calling them as core and community challenges. So 40% for the core challenges and 60% for the community challenges. And these core challenges seem to me important and for the you know, Cardano ecosystem, and they are there, you know, they are always important. And then there is a sort of creativity left for the community to decide which community challenges we could go for each funding cycle. So that could be interesting actually to consider and discuss maybe.
Yeah, love it. This is crossed my mind as well, is that the high level categories doesn't have to be the be all and end all of like, that's it. Like, it could be just to guarantee that we always have capacity to fund things in the developer ecosystem, things that improve Catalyst, things that improve Cardano, that we know the need to have funding available. But yeah, maybe it is like it's 50-50, maybe it's an 80-20, I don't know, you know, but maybe there's there's still, if you have it, it's completely community choice. There's still these problems that we have, like bad incentives for people to make the stuff that helps them, and all these different problems that need to be resolved, and how that process goes. But I still think there's, like there's no reason why it can't work alongside, securing the simplicity side of the high level category. So I'm gonna get, I've got that link now on my page, so I'm gonna think about that a bit more. And yeah, thank you for sharing, Tommy, and then bringing that up. So. Tommy,
maybe I'll just continue then.
That's it.
Yeah, thanks Oscar for introing it. Yeah, so the percentages you see on that are just examples. I was just very much inspired when I saw your work, and I was like, okay, I need to visualize this stuff. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I think it's kind of coming together. Someone mentioned in the chat that we are getting to the point that we need a way to reach consensus and implement this kind of changes. And I see this over and over again everywhere in Catalyst. Like, people are so tired of coming together and talking about stuff and never doing anything. So it's time to start doing things.
Yeah, without the kind of tools, and there is this kind of issue with. And this is the kind of thing where I actually started the Catalyst contributor stuff, is because when you just kind of leave it to the community, like, unless they have systems for coming to consensus and being like, this is the way to do it, it's like you have lots of different ideas, and there was no incentive to the funding structures, proposal-based funding structures, incentivize you to kind of build up your own thing rather than collaborate. It was just like, well, I don't need to. Like, if I think it's this way, then I can just make a proposal and I can get funded for it, and then I do some other things. So it's like that structure. Cause potential issues where if you're just funded as an individual and your goal upon being funded is to maximize impact, you're incentivized to collaborate, you're incentivized to reach consensus, rather than you're incentivized to think of ideas and get funded by ideas. So I'm hoping this with consensus, having funded by people, whether it's Catalyst contributors, and now I'm been thinking about stake pool contributors, how those can just bring alignment and really be this glue, this coordination glue. Hopefully that helps. But with this high level category stuff, yeah, we don't have it in place yet, and it's going to be, I don't know how easy it's going to be for me to try and push this across the line. Like, if it's the right thing, I think it's the right thing, but with feedback, we'll see. It's not easy. It's very hard right now.
I actually had a question for you. I don't know if you answered that because I was away for a while, but how did you arrive at these particular categories?
So it's just really thinking. I mean, it was just literally thinking about what things cover what's going on in the ecosystem. So the Cardano and Catalyst ones were just the easy starting points. Anything that's like tooling to build on Cardano that helps with that open source stuff. Anything that's improving the governance, the Catalyst thing. Then dApps integration to just building on top. So that was easy and done. It's like, okay, well, there's still things like marketing, events, and all that kind of thing. And I was like, how what? And I kind of combine those to outreach and community. And so far it's worked. Like there wasn't any approach too much per se. I have thought about things like, there's a few ways you can do it, like marketing, product, or maybe things like that. You could do it. I saw another one by Len. I don't know if Len's here today, but he talked about, I think, like how it's kind of structured, like if it's open source, if it's for private business, a few different things like that. I haven't thought of a better approach than the ones I've thought of at the moment, but I'm very open to them changing. I'm not deeply opinionated on it. It's just something that worked. That was a small number, and like they were very objective based. Like Catalyst has an objective to maximize and improve that governance system. Cardano, it maximized that ecosystem, make it easy to develop onto. dApps is just like, we're bringing users onto it. Outreach and communities, like how can we bring people together, like talk to governors, like anything to do with communication, bring people together, all of that side. So they have very clear objectives, and that's the reason I was just like, this makes a lot of sense. But
I just want to very quickly comment on this before Dwayne and Felix can jump in. I think it really brings clarity when you have that kind of core challenges that are kind of fixed and not changing. And whatever those are in the beginning, they should be few in numbers and not too many. And also the approach I took, actually, I didn't see these categories before now that you had come up with. So the approach I took was to look at like any business or any organization and what do they do, like finance, marketing, blah, blah, as you said. And then kind of adapted that into the Catalyst situation. Like, okay, open innovation platform is much different than a multinational corporation, but they still kind of deal with the same stuff. There's money, there's people, there's production or service that they deal with, and our process is all about innovation. So that was kind of the core thing to be there also. But this can also change. Like if I think one of the coolest things about your research and analysis was to see how things have developed. Like if you look a year ago, there was 2 categories. Now we have plenty. So it is changing, and we could also let people to vote on the maybe the number and like, I don't know, the number should stay very low of the core challenges, but which ones those are, that could change over time, but it should be quite fixed so that we don't end up in a situation that there's no challenge for dApps or there's no challenge for developer ecosystem. So yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I think we should think about the I think, and they're in that link. I think you shared that with the solutions, innovation, marketing. I think you and me should have a chat about that and just try to think about how some of the challenges go into that at the moment, and why people, let's say from this Catalyst, Cardano, these different kind of areas, how they would use them, because that would make us kind of think about, is it going to be more complex to use and stuff. So it's like that would be the comparison I think we need to make. But yeah, maybe they're better. I need some thought. But yeah, thank you, Dwayne.
Yeah, just going back to your comment about how to implement this. My first thought would be for the Fund 9 challenge settings to have the categories and just use them to tag on each challenge setting. And then in the voter tool, just allow users to sort by challenge settings. So you've got all the, or sort by category. So you've got all the challenges in category, I don't know, membership, whatever it is, right? And then as you're going in, like in the voter tool now, when you're in each challenge, you get the total of how much you voted for each proposal in that challenge, and just keeps coming down. You could do the same thing based upon the category tag, and that gets you your start. So you can say the budget in this category. So for membership category challenges, you've put in 30% or something like that, right? And that gets you your start. Anyway, that's just my thought, how you might approach it.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about when if I'm the one who makes these proposals is to tag the top of them with like open square bracket, new, close square bracket, and have that across all of them, so people, this is distinguished that these are the group, and then be like, this group represents this kind of approach. The point, yeah, this thing, like the problem with them being in the same thing, as I'm concerned, it would be nice to have some way to, because if it's just them voting for these things, it's kind of like a continuation of the existing system of like, oh, well, it's voting for challenge settings every time. Whereas I think really what this analysis is leading to is, I think like we're voting for this to become whether it's all or most of the portion or some percentage of like, these are always here. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of part of the thing I'm trying to push forward.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I'm just suggesting a half step as opposed to a full step, I guess, right? Because once you've got the tags and the categories in there, right, then people can see what we're talking about, and then you can go for the challenge or 10, Fund 10, right? Go for the next step. That's all. I was just trying to figure out how you would get from here to there. Yeah,
it's not simple. I think I'll be messaging Chris, Danny, and Marek about if they've got any thoughts on it as well. But thanks, Felix.
Hey, exactly to this point, reaching out to point, and also about the implementation. Let's say, okay, how to get it through? Maybe, okay, which ways do we have right now in Catalyst to make any decisions, let's say, by the community? We have Project Catalyst and the proposal process. And then we have the Catalyst Circle. And we know Catalyst Circle right now does not make any decision, but we definitely want in the future a group or several groups who are able to make decisions based on expert opinions. And until now, since Catalyst Circle version 1, this is kind of funny, but we never had an initiative coming from the community to the Catalyst Circle with a problem, with something to say, hey, here is a group of people, as a petition, for example, Catalyst Circle, we ask you to take care for. Make a review, make a refer, check it, present it to the community, explain the trade-off, whatnot. And maybe it's time now also to come to that the community forms really specific and concrete initiatives to go to the Catalyst Circle and give them something to do as well in this regard. Because this is something else what I can tell you also about the Catalyst Circle. They hardly struggle to define their actions and their scope. And the community is really needed as well, and the initiative from the community to actively give the circle itself work with specifically stuff like this here, right? Because I would rather prefer to see a group of very deep Catalyst experts having a look on it, representing different stakeholder groups, coming to a conclusion, rather than having maybe 10,000 votes on the proposal, but I know 8,000 of these people never have been on idea scale, never whatnot. So to say, okay, also for which decision, who do we want to vote? Because very honestly, I'm not a tech guy. I should not even have the right to vote on something when it comes to parameter change on the blockchain, for example, because my vote would be only influenced or stupid as fuck. So I should shut the fuck up, right? It's just very honest. Say, okay, vote there where it makes sense. When it comes to specifically topics like this here, this is much more really a hardcore Catalyst problem, right? You sit there with the people who have the experience to come up with solutions like this. So maybe also to try to develop another process to say, hey, okay, how do we want to have processes in place who makes decisions like this one, for example?
Yeah. And I think it's the thing that isn't discussed enough is, and the reason I've had why I'm not currently working on this reporting tool that I know isn't blocked by things and I can work on it is, and it is authority. It's like the community individually doesn't really have authority at the moment, and the Catalyst Circle doesn't really seem to have authority, but we need to have ways to make decisions, and not everyone needs to be like, you want to delegate decisions, like the community isn't going to decide whether we should be using React or Vue for our front end framework. That doesn't make sense. So there's scales of governance. There's like who should be involved in everything, but it's like a parameter change that affects all of us, or something very localized, and it scales out. And it's like there's things where certain people need to be involved, but at the end of the day, you still need to have some people you're going to delegating to help with that authority for that kind of thing. And this is the thing we don't really have, and Catalyst Circle could be, and this is something that I hope that full-time contributors can be. It's like or whether Catalyst Circle does this for this, maybe this specific problem, or contributors or whatever. We do definitely think about more about how to delegate authority, and for it to be like, here's the things that you can decide on. Here's the kind of policy, the framework around it. So you just have this kind of way to make change. Like obviously it's very easy in Web2. It's top down. It's like this guy comes in, he's like, this is what we're doing. Or it's like you're a sub manager. He's making a decision for this. Like you were doing this. But for us, we need to have this kind of like group, nice community way of this, like these guys are doing the technical stuff, they're voting, this thing's going to change, they're including the ones that people need to be involved, so it's manageable. Because like for instance, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I can't get, I tried to get through this round funding. There's a few challenges. I just don't have enough information here. Like for me to go through all this, I went through all the other ones. It's like I'm just going to spend like another 5 hours on this. My capacity isn't there, and I don't even have enough intel to really go through all this, understand everything. It's like I have limited amount of time I can do, and that's someone who's really keen. Like I'm bloody keen, but it's like, am I going to spend 12 hours to vote on every single thing? It's like no, it's just not practical. And we have to accept that. And when you look into Ethereum and how they're kind of doing stuff, it's like there's loads of evidence when you look at Kevin from Gitcoin and all those kind of people. Everyone loves talking about governance, but no one likes to get involved with governance. Like there's a lot of evidence already in Ethereum that you can see. Well, that is always pretty true. And it's really the art to it is really like, how can we make sure that when people care about something, they can make sure they're allowed to vote for it. And it's like all those relevant things that each define, they can vote for it. And if they're relevant, all of that. And it's not restrictive, but it's sensible. It's very difficult because there's so many different levels of decisions. But I think over the next kind of months, with some new structures, maybe Catalyst contributors, we can start to define some of the early embryonic stages of things that make sense in different scales, and we start to evolve in this, and then we have this kind of way to make decisions much more quickly, rather than not coming to consensus, in 6 months. So yeah, it's great topic. Sophie.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that idea about the circle, and I think that there's some opportunity for what you suggested, Felix, as well. But it also convolutes a bit the role, right? Because it is supposed to be a sensor array, right? And not an actor array. And that is like, yeah, it's often what happens, right? It's sort of a natural process. It's like you put something to sense the problem, or if you sense a problem, you want to do something about it, right? It's very natural to want to do that. And also for people to start expecting the circle, like, hey, yeah, you said this is a problem. Why aren't you doing something? You're doing something about it. But the problem is that it also kind of starts reinforcing that central authority. And this is the same that happens sometimes. It happens with local governments and participation in communities. It happens with IoG in the community, and nobody wants it to happen, but it's a natural occurrence that it's the expectancy that, hey, they should do something, this authority, because they have the authority now. So they do something, but they take charge in doing that. So maybe the other way around is more that, because there is now an initiative, right? There are people who are like thinking about this, making plans in the community. And maybe it's more for entities like the Circle to spot this kind of activity and to bring those people together and to support them in taking charge in that, instead of the other way around, in taking charge of the solution, but taking charge in the facilitation and the support, and giving a stage to those kind of efforts. The same with challenge teams, right? Right now, IoG is really leading the effort of how the challenge teams get together even and form, right? But there are also people in the community who have been trying to do these kind of things, right? And so if they also, yeah, it's also about observing. And it's like you said, like nobody from the community showed up at the Circle with like, hey, we're doing this, we want to work on this, and the other way around, right? So both parties have an equal responsibility in that.
Can I respond for this then? Because I
course,
see
yeah.
you have your hand up.
Go on. Yeah, I mean, it's very, go. It's absolutely no. I ain't gonna stop you.
I just want to ask for Dan if it is okay, because he had the hand up.
Wait, who? Sorry,
Dan.
Danny.
Dan. No. Okay. Anyway, he said
Oh.
yes. To the Catalyst Circle, I think each time when we say they don't make decisions, it's not true. Everybody makes decisions, even to submit the challenge proposals, like for example, rapid funding challenge mechanism to onboard the CAs in Fund 6. Decisions are made, right? The thing is how decisions are made, I think. And when we have the Catalyst Circle who legitimates their action by exactly what you said to Sophie, to say, okay, they should support community initiatives who work already on this. Even this is it's a decision, right? They do. The thing now is to say maybe, okay, how can we create a legitimate process which allows the Catalyst Circle to give a community initiative weight and focus, for example. Because when Catalyst Circle would come now and say, hey, guys, this makes fucking a lot of sense. And Catalyst Circle version 3 takes the responsibility to submit the 5 category challenge proposals, for example. It's not the community who submits the proposal, it's the community who, for example, in this case, George, who defined the categories, who defined specific challenges, then gives it to the Catalyst Circle. And when they make a review and engage the community really in a, let's say, bigger process to check it, to think about it, brainstorm about it, let's say, then they say, oh, okay, cool. Let's submit the challenge proposals under the name of the Catalyst Circle, which then purely represents the community. So they make a decision, but they make a decision which is forwarded to them by the community themselves.
Yeah.
This is very the same what we made in Catalyst Circle version 1 already. When we censored the very first problems, we went out to the community, censored the problems, clustered them, gathered them, brought them together, and then initiated initiatives by the community to solve those identified problems. That's it.
One thing that even whether it's either the Catalyst Circle or contributors and that kind of thing, I mean, one of those things can also be not to make the decision, but to facilitate making the decision. So it's like they're just saying, this makes a lot of sense, both of them, whatever organization, and it's going, we just need some sort of process, whether it's a Google form, this or the other, and this is the process in which we're going to do the governance kind of thing. At the moment, for instance, for Catalyst Circle, we just kind of go into these Zoom rooms, we do this kind of voting thing. So we've made some process for making that decision. Again, for this kind of like bigger system kind of thing, we don't really have very good tools for it, and this is a problem that hopefully with things like credential and stuff, we're going to, and definitely I'm looking at a lot to try and hopefully kind of solve. But in the short term, we just need some, who should be involved in that decision? Like how can it work? And sometimes it could be, I mean, one way obviously is to use the existing system with how we have idea scale. And this is the way I'm at the moment thinking it works, it could do it. But there could be some other system that kind of goes, we decide, via Google Forms, you've got to add your email, and then maybe it checks with your idea scale. But it's like all of this stuff takes time, complexity, and that kind of thing. So it is another way we can do it, but it needs some thought. And maybe that's where these kind of bodies can help with, is to try and think about how can we make sure this decision is done the best we can, because it's never going to be perfect in the short term. I think that's something that we can quite clearly say now, is that whatever it is, it's not going to be what we want it to be. It's going to be best efforts, and then as we mature and have more tooling and stuff, we can improve that. So sorry for keeping you waiting, Dan. Floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I just Felix, I really agree with you completely that this the ideation has to come out of the community. All ideation, everything from what we want to do to how we're going to accomplish it, our proposals, everything should come out of the community. And so I'm very interested. I've only been involved in the Cardano community for since last September, when at the summit, and I've begun to realize that the community is still kind of undergoing kind of a culture change, that there has to be a shift toward beginning collaboration within the community, just like you said, that these ideas have to come out of the community. So I've been thinking that it's best to develop more of a front end to a process prior to the idea scale process, one where we seek community agreement and understanding and shared ideation around what it is we want to do, and do that as in a community process. So this is why I've been keep talking about this front end, which is a more collaborative environment to develop those things prior. And with regard to governance, I think governance has to come from within the community, and something that happens on a regular basis. It's just part of the culture of the community. I've been working for the past 5 years on a project we call FreeOS. It's in the EOS.io ecosystem before I got involved with Cardano, and it really has a governance process. Its community engagement depends upon governance, and everyone who is involved in the community has to be involved in the governance in some small way. And it's basically just a dashboard that comes up regularly to seek community involvement, engagement, and polling, and try to understand where the community is at. It's kind of a sensor thing, but it's on a every basis. I should just also add that right now, if you want to understand that a little bit better, our project that's been going on, and it's called the FreeOS project, is going to be launching next week on Monday. And I'd encourage you all to just go and take a look at FreeOS.io. I'll post a note there, and you'll get to see somehow, this is kind of the fundamental idea of how we integrate governance into a community development currency and engage people in that governance process as kind of a direct democracy, in a way that we organize ourselves around the principles of community. So that's all I really have to say. I'll post the FreeOS.io in the chat here, and if anybody has any questions, you can always contact me.
Yeah, please share anything in the chat, or any other links that you think would be interesting. I'll definitely take a look for sure. Thank you for that, Dan. Ken.
Hey, I guess one thing I've been thinking about during this discussion was, like in the papers for Voltaire, they talk about doing stuff with liquid democracy. So where you can delegate your vote to somebody. And I was just thinking about how that could relate to the idea of the different categories. So like, not necessarily, like I'm not sure how it would fit in with the like allocating the funding, but I was thinking of it more like the ability to have like voting guides, and maybe something like the circle could sort of aggregate those and put them together. But like if you have it so that like different people can put together voting guides according to things that they know about, things that they're interested in, then the way that those overlap could also be used as like a discovery mechanism for people to be able to traverse different proposals and look for things that they're interested in. So I don't know, those just some ideas I was thinking about. Just wanted to throw them out there.
And they're amazing, great ideas. This is something that I've also been thinking about in terms of this is the nice thing of having some more rigidity to these categories, is that with this experts thing is, let's say I know Catalyst pretty well, and I could probably make a fairly well educated and well informed decision about certain things that are going on there, but even just the Cardano ecosystem and all the SDKs and stuff there, not as much. And in the dApps and maybe like certain things, not so much. So if you have this kind of slightly more rigid categories, you could delegate your vote for ADA for a specific thing that's ongoing. So it's like, I'm not really looking into the outreach and community category. So I'm going to delegate to someone I know who literally does that. He's inside out. He's at every event. He's on the line. He's like, maybe it's Felix or someone who's like really widely across kind of different things, doing events, that kind of stuff, that kind of character. And they show this kind of curated list, this backlog of things they've done in the history of the previous ones. And you have some confidence of leaving that vote to them. And maybe that kind of system could work. That's like you delegate your vote. And another idea I've had is like, if you could do that, and let's say you do it for, let's say, even for all of them, it'd be nice to have that as like the backup. So you could be like, them be your backup vote, but then you could do a superseding vote. It's like, I'm going to get involved a little bit and do the things I know I think are cool. Like I'm going to go into here, do a bit of voting here, and it supersedes whatever, the expert voted. So then you have this kind of like, you know people who are going to helping out, but then you can add in your own kind of flavor and the effort that you want to put into in the areas that you're most interested in. And that I think kind of works quite interestingly. Like this is the problem with when you have this very changing challenges and all kind of, differently how they're written and all that kind of thing, is like, who's the expert on those kind of things? If they're similar enough, you can see like, oh, someone's been like, is all focused on this topic. But when you have that kind of complete chaos and flexibility, it adds more complexity into like, how are you delegating that? Who are the people I'm trusting with a partial of that voting? So an exciting area to explore, I think, because yeah, I'm both excited and concerned with the delegation of votes. Like I'm concerned about the obvious thing, the big YouTubers getting massive amounts of votes because they have the following, and then them being the dictators of what things get funded in Catalyst. Not a great outcome. I think we all know that. That is, if there was like 5 people who had most thing, it's not really a great outcome, especially if they weren't actually necessarily experts on the thing. It's just because they had more clout. Maybe it's Charles. Maybe it's this. It's like it wouldn't necessarily be a fair reflection. So there's lots of things concerning but exciting about that I think we need to think a lot about. I don't know where it is in the timeline and the path for when IoT released that, but yeah, without a lot of thought, there's a lot of problems that could happen. Tommy.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this and made that illustration, I was thinking that it could be like a dashboard where you could even have like preset percentages coming from certain groups. Like they could be like, what does WADA think, or what does the women of Cardano think, or what does the Swarm think, or whatever. And you could just like, with the click of a button, see like, oh, these would be the percentages from them, and then you could adjust it based on what you think. And this is only for the challenge setting and that kind of stuff. But then maybe you could apply similar logic to actual solution proposals. So there's so much room for innovation when it comes to the UX UI part after after we get rid of what.
Oh yes. And this is partly why I'm so obsessed with trying to find ways to simplify things. Is like, even if it did make sense in any way, the challenge setting things, it adds a lot of complexity for voters, for community advice, for everyone, for every single stakeholder. It makes it more complex. And generally, like, I mean, just general tech approach or Silicon Valley, whatever, is just like, what's the simplest way to do this most effectively? And if you're adding on complexity, have a damn good reason for it. Because like at the end of the day, you make a product. If you make it slightly more complex in every area, you make a very, very complex product. So for each time you add in this complexity, how can we think about it? Like, is this really adding value, or is it just, you know, it's very marginal value, but it comes at this massive cost that now everyone's just getting frustrated at using it.
Yeah,
it's a trade-off.
I just wanted to go back to that sub-circles discussion, because I really see it as a two-way street, that the circle can take some of these more strategic initiatives and then get them implemented through the sub-circles. And when I say sub-circles, I'm not entirely sure what I'm talking about, because they don't exist yet. But it's up to us to actually make it happen. So that's one way of like implementing strategic initiatives. But then the other part is that these people who gather around certain idea and hold it close to their heart and think that this is important, they can, like you said, bring it to the circle and say, can we do this? And then the circle can give them some feedback and maybe get some external feedback and whatnot. And once the plans are ready, say, go ahead and do it. So I think there is potential for a lot of positive action through this kind of setting.
Yeah, I'd agree. The first kind of I think somewhat nearly approach for a sub-circle is this kind of auditing group that's going to come on, that I kind of had the idea of it being a sub-circle, but I'm still involved with everything that's going on there. But now I've thought about Catalyst contributors. Everything about that just seems to be far more effective in like how it should pan out. But that's a whole different tangent. That's very different than the Catalyst funding thing, so I won't go down that path. Catalyst contributors. Where are you going, Dan? Or are you, which one? Are you coming or going?
I'm sorry, I gotta go.
Absolutely fine. Thank you for sharing the link, and thank you for your input. Catch you soon.
No, thank you. I just have to get to another appointment. See you soon.
No worries.
Bye-bye all.
See ya. Jonathan, James, who hasn't spoken?
Morpheus.
Henry. There's quite a few people who haven't spoken. Is anyone want to throw an oar in? Any concerns that you have, or generally think it's good, generally think it's bad?
I really like your work on the categorization. I don't really have anything massive to contribute contrary, because it looks just, I can't really fault it. So it's a great first stab, George. I really like the idea of bringing that to a decision, or to a decision platform that can reach consensus a bit more quickly than the typical Catalyst lifecycle, because there's so much that needs to be done, and some decisions just seem so sensible that it shouldn't need, a massive vote to get it done. And I think it boils down to this whole domain specific expert question. So if we have domain experts in a certain area, then they should be able to just make decisions and try, even if it's an experiment, they should be able to be given the power to actually try it and see how it goes. And if it gets rejected, then that's fair enough. But it's almost like if we're moving towards having delegated voting and liquid democracy, where we're trusting domain experts for specific areas, we're assigning our votes to people we trust in a particular area of expertise that we're not familiar with ourselves, then bringing that forward in a smaller scale that isn't set in stone seems like a good idea to to start trying some of these things out. So it'd be really nice to say, okay, cool, let's agree together that we'll put these categories up onto Idea Scale for Fund 8, and we'll spread the word and have a little marketing campaign between the the people who involved in Catalyst heavily and who everyone knows about, and just say, okay, let's try that, see what happens. I think that would be a good first approach.
Yeah, I personally have no qualms at all with IOG just like being able to make, like, we're not at the point where it's easy for the community to make this decision. I've no issue with IOG making a decision with as long as the community has presented all the analysis and good reasoning for why, and then they can be like, invite everyone to give their feedback and then make a decision at the end. Like there's nothing wrong with that, I think, in the short term. And whether it's that or we say there's these experts who are going to do it, we're going to delegate some experts and some whichever thing. Just this, and I think this is the same concern, same idea of same concern with speed, is just so we can get to the stage where we have things in place where we can kind of do those votes in a better way, is where we're all trying to get to that. But there's this kind of this interim stage where it's just kind of accepting we're not quite there yet, and there's nothing wrong with finding different ways to solve that problem in the short term, as long as you do your absolute best efforts to make it fair, inclusive, and that's all you can do. So I think it's a conversation,
and the pace that we're growing as well. The longer things are drawn out in terms of making changes, the harder it's going to be to change them later on, or to inject fresh ideas. We should be fast iterative experiments right now.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed. That's why I'm kind of rushing to do these certain documentation. It's like, this needs to change. This is getting chaotic. It's this thing. Like, how do I get across the line? And it's just like it's a challenge. Yeah, it's but same sentiments, Jonathan. James sentiments. James.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm pretty new in this space and just trying to get my head round some of the challenges that are involved. And obviously, there's great challenges because it's you're aiming high. But from just the small amount of time I've spent in space, I can see how sort of in some areas a structured sort of a broken down voting system to actually push things forward. A lot of decisions need expert panels, in my opinion. There's a lot of things that if I voted on now, I'd just be voting for the sake of voting. You might listen to someone's opinion, but unless you actually have enough time to really research and dive deep into something, then you're just going, well, this guy seems clever. I like the way he talks about it. I'm going with that. So I mean, along the sort of, but I also see the problem of giving too much power to panels of experts. Could there be sort of elected panels who have sort of decision-making rights, but then before anything's implemented, a simpler questions put to the greater community? This panel have discussed X, Y, and Z, have come to this decision. As a greater community, there are these options A, B, C. So rather than because I think when people have a small amount of understanding and get involved, there can be a lot of chat that's not actually directed. So there's expert opinions to be kind of a bit more, put into a little concise form that an average understanding get their head around and make a decision on. Could then speed the whole process up, because there can be a lot of chat and going around in circles with people talking about stuff they don't really understand. That's my sort of little 2 pence on it for the minute.
Yeah, fully agree. And it's like, I mean, with what I've done with this documentation, I know there's only a small percentage of people who actually go through and read that. There's probably a few people who may have liked it or shared it who only read half of it. It's the nature of the thing. It's like, to really understand lots of different areas takes excessive amounts of time. It's like everyone only has a limited amount of time. So I think there's always going to be this case of delegation, and then the second problem comes that you mentioned, that you don't want to give that delegation too much power. I think regardless of how we go forward, it has to be an open system. Like any kind of these big decisions has to be, whether it's, if it's like a, you know, a decision that doesn't need to have everyone else involved, it needs to be completely open and transparent, like, which is what, which has been good in Capitalist Circle, living and breathing, that kind of open thing. Maybe there's, and how that's implemented can also be done in a few ways. Maybe, like, you know, people should provide their reasoning, but, you know, this, what their main points are for why they're making a decision. If it's a big enough decision or something like that, it's like, here's the 3 main things why I voted for this. And, you know, so it's like a history of like, these the people who we've delegated power to, they've got some incentive. There should be, like, if you're doing that work, there should be some incentive. You should really be paid for it. But, you know, we expect you to do it well and you're accountable for it. And that's but yeah, like, I think this is another thing that I think the community will need to be involved in, where the line stops and how it kind of goes out. Is like, we should be, and maybe there should always be like a process before they do the vote, where it's like, they have to do a feedback process. If it's big enough decision, it's like, you know, are you happy for us to make this decision? Or like, you know, or the policy already says that it needs to go to everyone. Maybe that's already pre-decided. But if there's any concern in any, or they've had a few bits of bad feedback, maybe they have to widen the net and be like, you know, we were going to do this, but it's clear that, you know, there's much more kind of controversy of it. We want to make sure we make the right decision. Or it could be just that, let's say it's a decision where even just within that circle, it's more 50-50. And it's like, it's obviously, it's not obvious. It's like, there's not a clear answer given all the information that we've provided and we've analyzed. And then in that situation, it's like, well, you know, we're not close to a decision here. And it's like, it's subjective. There isn't a right or wrong. It isn't binary. It's trade-offs. And, you know, in this instance, maybe it's like, okay, fine, we'll put it all wider. And this is the complexity. I think Brexit's like the perfect example in England, where it's just kind of like decision paralysis, where no one had any backside clue about all the implications of Brexit. And I was, even as someone who had some time capacity to look into it and stuff, still really didn't understand all the implications. But I should definitely have the right to vote on it, because it impacts me very much. So this is a really good example of where I should still be involved, but the people who you delegate to need to be very effective at presenting the facts and objective things about that decision. So I think there's much more. There wasn't much consensus on the things that are factual on the decision that was being made. And like, if you're ever making these decisions where it's complex to the outside user, like the people who are delegated to help support the governance of that decision, who have been delegated to help with it, because there's still always going to be someone who has to kind of organize it. They should also be responsible for, like, what are the key things that everyone needs to know about this decision? Because if you don't give it to them, they're just literally, they're doing exactly what you're mentioning. It's just like, I've got no idea how to you know, decide on this, even though it does impact me. So I should, if it impacts me, you know, and it's a big enough impact, I should vote. But like, I don't have the time to go in the nitty gritty like some people do, you know, may do. I just want to have the key facts that these guys vouch for, that they've done the work on, so then I can actually make a decision and participate where it makes sense. And it's going to be hard. But I'm hoping this is where we're heading. I'm hoping this is where we're heading, where it's just kind of like, it's not just about voting. It's about information gathering and determining between subjective and fact. Like, it's not like when, and I'm not a big fan of party politics kind of thing. Like, when you have groups, you have groupthink. You have, you know, you want to focus on policies rather than just like making groups. The reason groups are so successful. It's very easy to, you want to belong, you want to be part of a group, but it leads to, like, you know, not necessarily the great dynamics. You just want to focus on specific things and bringing the right information for that thing. As a decision, it's not just about who to involve. It's how do you make sure the right information is there to make a good decision. And I'm going to stop rambling. So, Sophie.
Yeah, I agree with that general thought that it's about better representing information and sharing information. That should be a key focus. And I think it was also mentioned earlier in relation to this whole idea that, yeah, you can see it as a systems change. You can also see it as a UI change, where people can see the categories, at least in the app, right? And that's already a way. And I think also there's, like, if you relate it to AI, right, you can let AI make decisions or provide a ton of information and really smart interfaces, right? That's like two different ways of looking at it. And I think also relating to what you said about, like, yeah, if the decision really affects you, then you want to know what happened there, which is a really strong argument to create systems where decisions don't affect too many people. and you have a choice to opt into systems, subsystems, right? The ones where you find, they have a system that is transparent to the level that I find comfortable, right? And that's like, I guess just a big thing in general in this space, like whether it's picking a stake pool, right? You can say, yeah, all stake pools should be transparent, but that's creating a central rule for everybody. On the other hand, if all of us find that and say, well, I'm only going to pick one that does that, then it sort of naturally creates that from the bottom up, right? It enforces it through our, like us all taking a responsibility in that choice. And I think that works on all these levels, right? Whether it's picking a representative, right? Yeah, they should share their ID. Well, or we should all only pick ones that do that, right? And then we kind of force them because that only makes sense, right? And now I say ID, maybe that's a really stupid example, but share their opinions transparently and their associations and something like that, right? So it's about the demands we put on these systems or these kind of choices that we make. But it also is important that we have a choice, right? Right now, there's a lot is in one system, right? There's one catalyst that sort of has one system of rules and it governs a lot. And I think also that's a kind of where some room is in challenges, right? Where they are creating more subsets of things. And if we have more layers of that, yeah, you can get to a point where maybe you are at some point working in this space where there's decisions being made all over the place, but they don't really directly affect you. So it's also not so important that you had a say in that, or that you know what was going on, or that that you were included.
Yeah, I think there's going to be loads of examples of where you're using a protocol and you just don't have the capacity. Like I'm going to be using a lot of DeFi, but I'm not going to have the capacity to do probably the governance on all of them well. Like and like you said, it's the information flow rather than restricting or doing any forms of restriction is generally the best way to go. So the stake pool thing's a good example. Like just having clear information about the implications of different things, so people can just it's just information. And as long as you can make that in some reliable way, people are then just informed. It's just their own decision. And there's no mandate, there's no this or that. It's just how do you propagate good information?
Yeah, and to add to that, like it is one thing that is kind of one of the concerns I have with this solution. Although I really think that the categories in general and the concept is really good to sort of start thinking on that level first before we start thinking about the more detailed specific challenges. I do worry that if we move to just a couple categories, that we are doing maybe the opposite, that we are creating large units where any change there affects a whole lot of people, where a change in like a smaller category. So maybe, yeah, why I would think of it as an extra new layer on top of like smaller challenges. And I would be a bit worried about just replacing on as a flat level sort of all the current challenge diversity with only a couple units.
As long as the high level categories capture everything the small level categories do, this removes some of my concern on it. It's like as long as it's still inclusive. I agree that it adds more risk that if those challenges categories change. I think the content, as long as they are inclusive to all forms of idea in those categories, sort that. Then if you were going to change a category, you'll generally be doing it because you want to break it down. So let's say maybe the dApps and integrations one is the first one that makes sense. But I mean, that's one that can be broken down obviously into loads of different things. It could be like logistics, gamers on chat, gamers. You obviously break down into so many things. But that's a decision that you can make because some factual reason why there's the data and evidence that supports it. And then it's like, everyone has the ability to propose in this. It's, like there's no problems. Like we're still going to be inclusive, but we're going to, for X, Y, Z reason, for instance, maybe there's 3 areas within dApps and integration. Maybe DeFi is so good and gaming is so good and all these things are so good. It's like, well, we'd like to try and add more budget to somewhere else, and this isn't working very well. I don't think actually these categories necessarily need to be the way to do that. I think it's really more of a community problem, just like how we have the SBO and the multiple SBO. I think it's more like it's hard really to mandate it too much. It's more just like, how can we improve the information flow? It's like, and be like, okay, these got good attention. How can we make these curated lists, this tagging? And let's say we've got this voting for budget weighting. Maybe there's a second level where we have votes to be like, okay, and it's completely separate from the funding process. It's like a sensor array, and it goes to the community. It's like, what things right now are the most important? Like what things do you think are really lacking? And then you have that information. And then maybe people can add evidence and information to that as well. It's like, oh, here's all the amazing things that are going on in indexes. It's doing really well. Like, we don't, like, there's so much going on in DeFi, we don't need to worry about it. But here in food and catering or something like that, it's like, there's loads of good ideas. Look at all these ideas people have. And we've also have a load of community who think it's a good idea. And so then you have this kind of information from the community. And then maybe that is the way that you present that in like a voting app, to be like, here's what everyone else is thinking at the moment. Here's all the reasons for it, and what's going on. So then, and then you can easily look for the ones that are relevant for that area of focus. So you separate this kind of, because it has as soon as you add on those more categories, it adds lots of complexity to the budget weighting, how you make the decisions, all of this kind of thing. There is complexity and cost to that in terms of the governance. So maybe it's a layer 2 kind of thing of just like, how do we perfect that problem setting? So maybe that's a potential avenue. I think that might be the way to go with it, maybe, but there's so many ways you can skin this cat. That is the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I do like the idea of sort of using a existing challenge that has a lot of traction and has been growing to use it as sort of like a sub experiment, right? Can we try this out in the smaller to see if it would work on the bigger scale, right? Say like that's a can we create some categories within that and maybe make that, for example, a challenge setting for the next round. So you have, it becomes its own challenge setting category where people can make, can make like challenges within the depth thing. And then it has its own budget already. It's maybe like a sort of a small experiment without having to change the whole system that you could do in the next fund round. But I would be a bit hesitant to push for something that changes the whole system for Fund 8.
Yeah, I mean, I'm understanding that when you're saying that is like having challenges within these high level categories, which it immediately screams to me as adding complexity. So like, I'm always scared whenever I think of like adding layers adds complexity. I think there's probably good conversation to have, and yeah, maybe it's like and it could work. Let's say you have the funding, the dApps and integrations, and then it's all just one thing. But then you just add this single kind of thing to be like, the community has said that you could still even use the same thing I was talking about earlier, and everyone says that we need logistics stats. So we just section off that a minimum of this is going to go to logistics, because and when you do that, there's like, this is the kind of problem with this when you do it at this bottom level, is that you kind of want to know that there's actually people who are going to come forward with ideas, because otherwise you just kind of like, you mandate that there has to be some innovation here. It's like that by mandating it doesn't mean that there's innovation there, and the team's there, the ideas are there. And this is why, like, I've been a bit like just doing these challenge things doesn't mean that things are going to happen and you're going to get the right outcomes. Like, you can incentivize it. Maybe you could have this kind of people saying that they're going to vote for you, and maybe you add on some, maybe let's say if you had rapid funding mechanism, is like, for any proposal that they get funded with to do with logistics, because this is the thing we want, we're going to give you a 10% uplift. We're just going to, from this treasury, we're trying to incentivize people to make those proposals. In that way, it's not mandated in the funding round, and it's like if the proposals don't come in that 3 month funding round, like it's wasted, or it's people that haven't really thought it through very much. It's like there's so much chance of buggering it up. Whereas if you have it like have a different incentive, so you just incentivize it so it's passive, then you don't have this risk at the bottom level where you're doing the categorization, and you incentivize it to, like, as soon as it comes in, the next kind of 5 proposals that get funded that are to do with logistics, you get this extra bonus or this extra reason why you do it. And then whether it happens within a month or 3 months or 6 months, it doesn't matter. Like, you're not forcing the innovation to because forcing it, you can't just like force things to be like, this is going to be the greatest team's going to form around. There's other ways we can do it, I think, that could be less risky, to be like, this portion of the funding is now just obsolete because at that time nothing was ready. So this is one of the things the high level categories helps to solve, and then you can build those incentives on top. But I don't know if I've documented that too well in the my docs. Like maybe I need to revisit it to kind of, because this is just another thing where it is it helps. Just constantly thinking about this. Never stop thinking.
Yeah, I did mean it indeed as sort of like a double layer where you have what you introduced is sort of like a intermediate category indeed. And maybe I didn't clarify that enough. And I totally acknowledge what you say, that there is a huge risk of adding just more complexity. And so if you would do that, you would really have to like be clear about which parts are defined in the top layer and just inherited by the bottom layer, to keep the bottom layer like just like adding the fluff or the detail or some guidance, maybe having overflow systems, like it would also be a more tricky endeavor to just introduce in general. So I acknowledge that, but I have been thinking about these things, and I guess I've been thinking a lot about these kind of extra layers. So I guess that's where I was coming from in the discussion in general.
It is still, and I agree, it's still important that we have ways to like indicate that this area needs more focus, and the high level categories on their own do not fix that. Like, you know, they solve a certain problem, they do not fix everything. It's like there's a next level where you've got to solve the other stuff. And this like, whether it's subcategory, all these different things, there's a few ways to skin the cat. But it is a problem that needs to be next if the community reaches consensus that this is a good starting point, and then we build on top of it with other mechanisms. Right. Anyone else that hasn't been? Jeff, Lynn, Yoram. I see you there, Yoram. You usually got your video on when you're in. So you're hiding.
Yeah,
you're hiding
I was in the car. I was driving the car, listening to all the incredible feedback from everyone.
I'll let you off. You don't know that on the recording. That's illegal. So.
Okay. No, of course. No, but three small things. I think the tagging is very interesting to add. I mean, if you have big categories and then you have tagging, I think it's something that is very interesting. So you call it subtitles, or that's something helpful. I mentioned one remark that it would be interesting to see in the past if we take the retroactive. I don't know if you did that, although Jonathan put a link, but I don't see it there. If we check all the previous funds and we group them in the high level categories, what will be the distribution? It would be interesting just as a exercise to see how the community did it without having the 4 big groups. I think it's interesting to understand. And the last thing, I mean, about the experts, we speak about the experts. It would be interesting to see maybe if we think on a group of experts, actually. So we actually vote for a group of experts and then decide. I don't know. I mean, one expert is always, that's it's also have a lot of challenges, I think. Anyway, but that's it would be interesting to learn more about that, kind of about this process of the expert and how it's going to be dealt in the future. I don't know enough about it to remark, but I just thought instead of delegating to one expert, maybe you delegate to a group of experts, right? Like if you look in Switzerland, right, there's 3 presidents, there's not one. And then they decide even in a country level, eventually between them. So, and the country works quite well. So interesting to see it also maybe here. Anyway, just 3 thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know what IOG's plans are with experts, but there is something we could do that might work, that we could use the existing system. Maybe we could have a challenge, as you could use the idea at a 0 cost challenge setting, and then people get voted for in there to be like, I want to be an expert of this thing, and then the community votes on it. So you could just use the existing tools and systems we have. You're not getting funded for it, but you're getting voted in as an expert. Obviously, you could also copy the Catalyst Circle kind of thing as well. I don't know where we are with all of that. Probably, I think the general ADA holder is the general ADA holder the best. I don't know. I've not done any analysis on this yet, so I'm going to be firing blanks on exactly what the outcome should be.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Johan.
Yeah, and thank you for doing all the work and coming up with that. That's thank you for
welcome.
that.
Welcome. Anybody else? Anybody else have any thoughts, ideas, opportunities, concerns? Bedtime it is. Bedtime it is. Well, if that is the case, how are we doing? Are we the last one standing? That wasn't my goal. We're nearly the last one standing. No, TiVo's going. Open room.
Reify project is still going on.
Yeah,
Workshop is
Reify.
going on, and the open room as well.
Well, I wasn't looking to beat them anyway, so